Hi there. Happy New Year. Welcome to Draw With Me. And we have just come back from vacation. So last week we didn't get a chance to draw with you. And we thought we weren't going to today either. But, we thought, what the heck? We got back last night in the evening.
I mean, it says everything you need to know about us that we came back from vacation early.
Exactly. Hold on. Let me introduce you. Here's JJ. And we
had a great time, but we were ready to come home.
It's true. Why did we come home early? We didn't come home.
We came
that
home early because our
hours.
ride actually had to go back to work. So we said, hey, you know what? We could broadcast our Draw With Me, because we were really meant to come back only like later this afternoon. So it wasn't that much early.
No, but it was a very nice time. And in fact, I want to show you a couple of pictures from our trip. Here we are. Before we went, we had to go and get some haberdashery.
Yeah.
So here's me trying on hats and boots and the like, looking vaguely like I'm not sure what.
Let's just be kind to ourselves.
I was toying with the idea of kind of taking this on as a look. Just kind of.
This is the look that works at the ranch. People wear this not ironically, yeah. and
actually
we did too.
But I have to say, like, you come to realize why all this cowboy gear, like what its real practical thing is. Like when you're riding around on a horse, having jeans on and having cowboy boots is like you'd get like scratched and scraped and all kinds of things.
Let me add, when you're riding around in the freezing rain, you wish you had chaps.
Yeah, and a cowboy
not
hat,
ironically, you wish you had them.
And a cowboy hat, yeah, exactly. Not even if you're not a member of the Village People, but cowboy hats are, I don't know, they keep the sun off, they keep the rain off, and they don't blow off when you're going really quickly. So they're pretty good. Here's JJ trying on hers. That red hat that you...
That red hat, the red straw hat that actually dyed my hair pink.
That's true. Because we spent one day riding in the rain, and that's what happened. So, and here I am on my steed. His name was Crow. He was a very careful horse. I was hoping for something a bit more sporty. He was kind of the Ford Taurus of horses.
The Toyota Camry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But kind of big and comfy.
He was roomy.
But not
roomy.
Really like speedy. So, yeah. So here I am. And we spent a lot of time on these horses. We rode generally from 9 in the morning until lunchtime. And then we often rode in the afternoon as well. So 4 or 5, 6 hours sitting like this. And I have to admit that I am old and decrepit, as I discovered on this trip, because you sit like this and your hips and your back and your knees start to really... But here's JJ with her horse. Do you want to tell us about your horse?
Oh, Camilo.
Camilo matched JJ very nicely. They're both blonde.
He's a Palomino. Yeah. He was a great horse. He was probably the most handsome horse in the paddock, if I had to... I'm a little biased, but yeah, he was great. He was fun to ride. He was tall. He was fast. He was responsive.
It was really nice. We haven't been there for 5 years, and I have to say we thought, let's go back this year, right? We want to definitely go back. It's not far from house. It was a 3-hour drive. So
yeah.
And then here is our new friend.
Oh, look at these. So this ranch, if you tuned into the last session, we told you about their corgis. They have now topped their very best with a cowboy corgi. So it's a cattle dog and a corgi mixed. Could you die? Look at this thing.
He's 6 weeks old?
7 weeks old.
Oh. And we could not keep our hands off this creature. So and we also missed, of course, Twiggy.
Oh, Twiggy Beefs. We have Twiggy Beefs back. She's giving us cold shoulder.
Here's Twiggy. She spent the week with her friend Lucy, who is a smaller version of herself. So that was our vacation. Twiggy's best friend is Twiglet.
Twiglet is Twiglet, and her best friend is Lucy.
Yes. What did I say?
You said her best friend is Twiglet.
Her best friend is not Twiglet.
And her other best friend is Luna, the Aussie. We love animals. We talk about animals, and we draw animals a lot. And
Animals are cool.
yeah, I think, speaking of, All Creatures Great and Small, going to plug that.
Yes.
Found out it's coming back this weekend.
I hope you guys have watched that. All Creatures Great and Small, based on the James Herriot books on PBS. And it is, I don't know, there's just something about, I feel like my interest in animals has even increased because of the pandemic. You know what I'm saying? It's like there's something about seeing animals, seeing birds, seeing how they live and how different it is from us and how neurotic we can be by comparison.
Right.
So, and I think having as many animals around as we have now had since we've moved here has been a boon as well to drawing, because it's an opportunity to kind of study them and see them in their natural habitat and so forth. So I think that drawing animals is a great way to build your skills, because it's they are moving, they are varied, they have emotions. We feel emotions about them. So if you have an animal and you haven't drawn it, start doing it. Just draw your cat, sitting around. Just the more you capture it, the more it will help you to really draw anything, because of the challenges that it presents. And also, honestly, a bad drawing of a cat or a dog is somehow less egregious than a bad drawing of a person. If you happen to feel like bad drawings are egregious, which I don't. But if you struggle with, my people don't look like people, try drawing animals, and they will help you to draw people, because you will slow down and you will just be more observant. So it also teaches you stuff about your animal that you may never have thought of. Everything from its proportions to the way that it sits and the way that it moves and the way that it reacts and so forth.
So 2 weeks ago when we drew ranch dressing, you had a lot of heightened anxiety about drawing a horse. Mm-hmm. Do you think you'd do a better job now that you've spent a whole week around horses?
Because a lot of times when I was sitting on the horse and I was looking at the other riders, I was really looking at their horses, and I was thinking about that. And I was realizing like how much stockier their bodies are than I thought. And it may be because these are quarter horses, and maybe I was thinking about race horses, but because race horses tend to be thinner and longer. But I started to realize like how kind of more squat they are than I thought, and realizing how powerful their haunches are and how much power there is in their butts and their legs, particularly when you're behind a horse, staring at his butt for hours at a time. You think about that. But also how long the head is. All these kinds of things you observe just because you're around them and you have that opportunity to do it. So I would think try and do that. My friend Roz Stendhal, when I first met her, I met her because she had been drawing her dog for 10 years. It was I think it was a husky, and she drew him or her every day for 10 years. And she had a whole shelf of sketchbooks just of her, what she called daily dots. I think she had something like 30 or 40 sketchbooks that she filled.
That sounds about right for Roz.
Yeah, Roz takes her obsession seriously. All right, so here's what I was thinking we would do today, which is kind of related to what we did last week, which is last week we drew from photos that we had taken at the ranch in the past, and we thought it would be interesting to kind of experiment with what it was like to do an illustrated journal page. So when you go on a trip, or even if you want to tell a kind of illustrated story about something that you're experiencing, there's a variety of different kind of ways of doing drawings that can add up to a single page. So you might have a single anchor drawing. In the case of last week, we drew a horse, and then draw some of the smaller elements around it. We drew some boots, and we drew one of the dogs on the farm, and we do some other things like that. So, and then to draw, to write a caption and maybe have a title for the whole page, and think of it as a piece of graphic design as well, so that you want to have a composition to your page as you have these individual images floating, you know, in the white space. You might also have a drawing in a shape. Like, for instance, if you had a piece of landscape that you wanted to add with a bunch of elements that were just simply objects, you could have that piece of landscape sit in a frame and be essentially another object. So it's interesting to think about this, about how how we play with composition, because I want you to think about your sketchbook not just as a place to do individual drawings or even random drawings, but to think about each page as almost the page in a book, right? How would the page in a book work? Where you have perhaps the type, you might have the head of the chapter, you might have a spot illustration, which is like a small illustration kind of floating, and the type wrapping around it. It's interesting to look at books and magazines and to think about these kind of compositional frameworks and structures and examples. So today we're going to do something different, though. We're going to draw a landscape. And I want to show, this is a picture, JJ, I don't know if you can see this yet, but this is a picture of that I took from horseback, which is an interesting challenge sometimes. But this is just the typical Southern Arizona landscape. And there's our friend Alice riding her horse ahead of me. And I thought it would be interesting to take this picture and to break it down to drawing, because this is also, I think it's a nice piece of landscape. It's slightly unusual. But what's cool about this is it's the opportunity to draw lots of different kinds of textures and to use different kinds of lines and mark making to represent all these different examples. So
what are you going to use? Are you going to watercolor?
I'm not. I'm going to just do pen.
Wow.
And yeah, so I think to take something like this and to just say, how do we represent all these different textures? Also, how do we break down this composition? How do we look at it in terms of the structure of the overall picture? And how do we create perhaps layers that show the foreground, the midground, and the background, and then the sky, of course, behind it? So,
do you think it's going to take you 45 whole minutes?
You know, I think look, this is the kind of drawing that you could spend way more than that on it if you wanted to.
I mean, Tommy Kane could probably spend 4 or 5 days on this.
It's true. I mean, you could spend a lot of time, but why don't we start, given what JJ just said, why don't we start by, I'm going to make it a bit smaller. You know what? In fact, let me go back to this. And I would just say, if you want to, do a screen grab right now so you'll have the full picture. Because I want to show you the picture, and I also want to show my drawing at the same time. So do a screen grab, and that way you'll have it to refer back to when I make it smaller, which I'm going to do now. Can we just
put the picture in the chat or no?
We could. I don't know if I can. No, I don't think you can do it not on YouTube. No. But I can probably share it somewhere later on. So, and yeah. So we're going to take this and why don't we start by maybe just doing some little drawings, some little kind of composition.
Are these just warm-ups?
Well, they're ways of looking at the composition.
But are they going to be part of the whole page?
I'm going to do them in the corner. So I'm going to take the corner of my sketchbook, and I'm just going to do, a shape that's kind of roughly the shape of this. And then let's look at, because I think this is a way of getting.
And what kind of pen? You're using dip pen?
I'm not. I'm using a fountain pen. Yeah, I'm using this kind of cool wooden fountain pen. It's a German. It's a Lamy, but it's a children's fountain pen. So, kind of, it's interesting to look at this in terms of what are the different shapes of the overall composition, and you can see that there's sort of 3 kind of basic levels to this, right? There's this sort of foreground piece, and then there's that sort of bit of clump of grass that's there, and then there's a tree here. But there's sort of almost equal size shapes of foreground and this sort of central part of it, and then there's this kind of a couple of pieces of mountain sort of sticking up in the background. So you can just sort of do a little sketch like this to just, and then there's what I like about having Alice in there is that she's kind of telling a bit of a story. You know, a lot of times if you look at just a photo of landscape, I mean, I'm sure you've done this where you see a beautiful landscape. This happened to us a lot on this ride. You'd come up a hill and you say, "Oh my God, that's so beautiful," and then you madly snap photos of it, and then you get back home and you look at the pictures and you're like, "Well, I don't know, it just doesn't capture what was so cool about that." And there's also part of it is because your eye doesn't have anywhere to go. You know, you can't capture this sort of sweeping vista, but also your eye doesn't have anywhere to go, particularly in a kind of undifferentiated landscape like this.
Hey,
Yeah.
Frito's asking a good question. How do you hold the pen?
Like this? Just hold it like a pen?
Yeah, your hand is sort of off camera.
Okay, sorry. So I'm just holding it like a regular pen. There's nothing special about a fountain pen,
Yeah,
particularly.
some people do that when they're doing like a rough. I've seen that.
Oh, you mean as if I like held it from the back or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's like an Ian Fennelly sort of.
Yeah,
when he's doing his little.
Yeah, you could do more gestural things. You could be, but doing a little sketch like this is kind of educates you a little bit about the overall shape, and you go, okay, sort of seeing like what this is, and then I could also do a tonal kind of composition where I could say, okay, so what's dark and what's light, and where are the dark shapes, like I might say that's darker, and there's some spots of things around here. There's sort of almost like a little line that's coming down here. But as I was saying, so having Alice there is a thing that draws your eye because, of course, we're more attracted to images of human beings than we are to just clumps of grass and trees and stuff like that. So she anchors you, and there's this concept of the golden, I don't know, what is it called? Where you have three...
Triangle.
It's not the golden triangle. That's something else, isn't it?
Golden rule.
No. Well, basically, if you take, I mean, you'll see this with your camera. Like you take a lot of times your camera will produce something that looks like this. It'll have this kind of grid on it, right? And it divides it into 9. So 3 rows, 3 columns. And then your eye tends to go to where these lines meet.
Golden mean. Thank you, Virginia. Golden mean. Rule of thirds. Jenny, see, our
audience is much smarter than we are.
Yeah. So smart.
Rule of thirds. So you can do that, of course, with your drawing as well. So theoretically, this is like, I could say my thirds are here and here, and I could say my thirds are here and here. So Alice is a little bit off that, and I could move her. Just because she's there in the photograph doesn't mean I couldn't put her here. So I might say to myself, you know what, I'm going to move Alice along here and have her sitting there, just so that way it is, in fact, in that place. I don't know that I will do that. It probably would be smarter compositionally, but it might. I'm also interested in using her as a place to kind of measure things and see, like, Alice, for instance, the top of Alice's head is kind of where this mountain crosses that ridge. So that is sort of helpful. And if I move her, that'll kind of throw that all off and I'll be more confused. So for now, I'm not going to do that, but it is something one could do.
Did you intentionally pick a photo with nothing in the sky?
With nothing in the sky?
Not a cloud in the sky? Look at it. It's like...
Beautiful day.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. So there wasn't really much intentional in any of this, besides this is a picture I took yesterday. So, all right. So I've learned a little bit. It's interesting to do this kind of a thing and to figure that out. And then there's also, this whole area, the more you study it, the more you see there's more going on here. And then this mountain, there's another little mountain back there. So now I understand this landscape a bit better. And I'm learning it in a way that isn't, there's less at risk here because it's just, a little sketch. I also personally happen to like sketchbook pages that have all these little notes and stuff like that. So if I said, like, if I wrote, like, this is Alice over here, Or I said, that's, I don't know. The various observations I could make in marginalia and put that down there. So you might want to think about that. Atomic Elf has pointed out that, yes, this is a jotter. That's what is it? What's it called? Jotter? Yeah, it's a little fountain pen designed for kids. And it basically functions like any other Lamy pen, like the Lamy Safari. So you can change the nib, and you can use the same sort of refill inside. I kind of like it. I like the feeling of the wood. I don't like the lid that much, but you can put your name in it, which is kind of cool. And the problem with it is it doesn't have a clip. And also, this is a really bad design thing. So they designed the back of this so that it's square, so that it doesn't roll off the table. But the problem with it is that this lid doesn't go on the back of the pen, which is really annoying. Which means that you're much more likely to lose the nib.
Cue like us getting some really hateful message from Lamy later today.
Not at all, Lamy. This is just information that you could use to benefit yourself. All right, so let's pull back a bit, and now let's try doing something. Oh, Atomic Elf is using a Parker Jotter. What is the name of that pen? I don't know. Maybe you could look it up.
What are we talking about? Sorry,
this Lamy pen. It's a Lamy, but I can't remember the name of it. It's a little wooden pen. Anyway. So let's keep the square.
ABC fountain pen.
Is that it? Okay. Take your word for it.
That's what it says.
Yeah, it's cute. So I'm going to try and basically eyeball the proportions of that photo. I could even actually line it up this way. Yeah, so I'm just drawing a shape. A lot of times you can do a drawing and forget that the shape of your page is not the same shape as the photo. If in fact you really want to adhere to the proportions of the photo really carefully. You don't really need to, of course. Nobody would really know. So yeah. All right. It's enough messing around. So I'm going to look at that distance from the top of the sky to the top of that ridge. And then I'm going to look at the distance here from where that kind of patch of grass begins and the little trail. And then there's Alice kind of there. And this has actually made it easier having this photograph to line up with my drawing, but that's not really what we want to rely on. And then this side.
I mean, I think if you don't do it often.
Yeah, it's kind of.
Because you want to be successful, right? You want to make something that looks good in your book.
Whatever works. So I'm going to I'm drawing with a heavier pen now, which maybe I think I'm going to switch back to that little one. I temporarily, to draw the edge of the frame, I switched to a heavier Lamy Safari nib. So I'm just kind of tracing along here, the top of this ridge, and then I'm kind of going down. We'll see, that's sort of roughly it. And then this, I look at the shape of this negative space here on the sky, and I draw this kind of first mountain here, and then it sweeps back up to the second mountain, which is slightly taller than the first one. We come down, and then there's that really far away one here. It's sort of the most blue, because of course the further away they are, the bluer they become here. And so one of the things that we want to think about here is what are different ways that we can make marks, because there's so many different things. There's stones, there's grass, there's bushes, there's pebbles in the foreground. These all could be different kinds of marks. And I think also we want to be fairly specific with our marks, so that each kind of mark is different from each other, and also that we're not just randomly putting a bunch of dots in places, but that we're actually looking at what we're seeing and trying to observe it. So these are basic guidelines that I'm putting in right now, and they'll probably end up being covered with marks. So I'll probably be able to make some adjustments later on, and I don't need to be too worried about these lines themselves because they'll probably be covered over. Now, you could, theoretically, do this with like a light pencil line, but I personally like to just draw in pen and kind of make a commitment that way. So now I'm just drawing the outline of the big shapes that I'm seeing in this mountain. And knowing that these are going to be kind of the bits that I'm going to fill in. And okay, let's put Alice in here. She's around here. Again, I'm not going to get too preoccupied with drawing her accurately because she's just a little figure. And as long as you sort of roughly know that this is a person on a horse, I don't need to worry too much about the details of that. And all right, so now I'm just drawing in the shapes of these bushes back here. Again, just the general outline of them and where they sit on the page. And now let's get down to this sort of patch of dried grass. I'm a little worried that I pushed everything over to the middle there. So let me just go and do a bit of measurement here. See, I'm measuring by looking at the photograph and using my pen as a ruler. I'm seeing that that tree is almost dead in the center, and I made it slightly further over to the left than it should be.
Why don't you just give it some more branches?
I could do that, or I could just say, you know what, it's sitting further over to the left in my drawing. You know, nobody's going to come back and double check my work. It's fine. I have creative latitude there. There's also some lines that you can see. So you just generally get a sense that like this hill comes down here and then this part is set further back. So you can draw a line here that gives you that sense. And then there's just some general this set of bushes are coming down this wash here. And
so that white rock, you see sort of a band of lighter colored rock
right in the center,
behind the tree.
Right to the right of Alice, yeah.
And as I understand it, that is like 400 million year old lava.
No kidding.
Yeah, the stuff that looked white.
Oh, that's cool.
Very old.
So you could take a drawing like this and you could use this as like a piece of illustration. Just, you know, it's a nice little drawing. But you could also say, I could label each of these mountains. I could label that lava there. And I could just write a little note that says, this is lava. Who'd have thunk it? That there's...
It's kind of starting to resemble the drawings you do of your toast.
I mean, that's the thing is like drawing toast and drawing a mountain is similar in that there's all these elements to it, but we don't really know. We don't have names for all these things. We can say this is a rock, but what is a shape? What is the kind of collection of rocks called? This shadow, by the way, is a kind of an important element here. It's actually the blackest thing.
The shadow of Alice?
Yeah, the shadow of Alice. It's kind of the blackest thing in the whole picture. Because that's another thing you might want to look at, particularly when you're starting to make your marks, is what are the tones? Like what's the lightest and what's the darkest? And do I want to use my marks to represent those gradations and that kind of spectrum of light and dark? Or do I want to focus more on textures? And if I do, maybe I can even combine both. So now I'm seeing like this kind of flat part here. These sort of almost different planes that are coming down here. All right, so I have sort of the basic bits worked out now. So now let's say I want to start doing some textures.
Going to use the same pen through the whole thing?
I think I am now, because this is well. Let me switch to this is an even narrower pen. So let me switch to that.
I think it would help to have different textures. Use different pens.
Yeah. So this is an extra fine. You'll see it's really the most narrow. It also seems to be a little low on ink. But there we go. So I'm just going to start making these mountains in the background. But you see I'm trying to keep my lines parallel, more or less. And then I'm going to represent the fact that this slopes down here. And I'm going to use my lines to do that with my text, my marks. And then there's this darker part here, so I'm just going to go over it. But I want to keep my lines fairly regular. I don't want to necessarily just go higgledy-piggledy all over the place.
How's that?
Higgledy-piggledy.
We did see some peccaries.
We saw peccaries. We saw coatimundis.
Well, let's talk about this javelinas before we go fast forward over them.
Okay, so peccarinas or javelinas are wild pigs.
Pecorino.
Pecorinos. They're very nice with a bit of pecorino on them. If you want to make like a,
So yeah, we saw many javelina, which I don't know what is the correct word for group of javelinas.
A rasher of javelinas.
That's terrible. We saw a single coatimundi.
True.
Cool looking, kind of silvery. We saw...
For those who don't know, coatimundi is sort of a combination of a raccoon and an anteater. Right, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. We saw a murder of crows.
Yes,
we saw a rafter of wild turkeys.
A lot of wild turkeys.
Oh my goodness. And they were doing some kind of rutting situation, so they were really savaging each other.
I mean, when you have 30 wild turkeys like 10 feet away from you, first of all, we immediately said these are dinosaurs, right?
Well, yes, but the most impressive thing was we saw them fly up into a pretty big tree. Yeah. And I didn't tell you this because we were shocked that turkeys could even do that because they're pretty big. Another wrangler named Kelly later told me that sometimes when they fly up in a tree, it's because there's a mountain lion nearby.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's the Wild West where we were.
So we saw hawks, we saw crows. We never saw an owl, although we were told one was about. Not the season for hummingbirds, but this is a major hummingbird junction, like an intersection where they migrate over the border from Mexico certain times a year, to and from. We saw a lot of deer.
We did. We didn't see many. We didn't see any hummingbirds.
No, not a one.
All right, so basically, I've used this particular kind of mark to make these mountains in the background. It looks kind of like patchwork, but I'm just trying to represent the fact that they, have a kind of a general sort of undulation, and that they are further back than these things in the foreground. So that was using my narrowest pen. So maybe I will switch back to this mid-sized pen just to do the mid-sized stuff. And I could think of doing a different kind of texture, but for now I'm going to keep with these sort of just indicating lights and darks. See, these bushes are generally dark, but then they have some darker areas. So I could do this whole thing in these parallel lines. But I could also do this just as the kind of underlying structure, and then you could go over and you could put another layer of different kinds of marks on top of them if you wanted to. You could also think about making your marks further spread apart as they get closer to you. If you wanted to sort of indicate that there's, that it's not just a flat plane, but they're coming by. Or I could also say, I'm going to create these little more rounded shapes, and I could kind of color in each one. By coloring in, I mean adding different kinds of tones to it. And I could make a whole section that is made up of these individual kind of little lumps and shapes.
So are all of your marks just cross-hatching lines, or are you going to make other kinds of marks?
So far these are not actually cross-hatching, they're hatching.
What's the difference?
So hatching is just lines. Cross-hatching are lines that cross on top of hatches. So hatches on top of hatches.
I see. So like hashtag.
Exactly. Hashtag crosshatch. So far my lines are not crossing. They are just parallel to each other. So but I think doing these individual shapes makes sense because they are individual bushes. And so kind of representing that. But I'm also trying to think about the underlying shape of the ground underneath them, and to put them to clusters that suggest
plantage,
but also kind of the underlying shape of the ground. Just think about that. And then this whole section is sort of more consistent. So now I have all these bits of grass in the foreground. This is kind of complicated because on the one hand, these are closer to me, which would suggest that you want to use, fatter lines, but it's grass. So you don't necessarily want to use big fat grass.
Yes, like how do you impart the fact that it's like light tan if you're not using any color?
I think I'm going to do that by just not having a lot of lines. So I'm just going to keep it fairly simple. I'm going to draw, this is sort of the shadowy part of it that you can see underneath the bits. But in general, I think I'm just going to do a few little lines that are just kind of indicating that there's some texture here, but I'm not really filling it in so that it seems lighter. And I think I would do the same with this very, very foreground where the pebbles are, because I want to sort of make that feel
light.
Exactly.
So Deborah's asking, can you change the line thickness depending on how you're holding the pen?
Yeah, I mean, certainly more with a dip pen.
Well, and also with those Pentel brush pens, you certainly can.
Yeah, but I would say with a fountain pen, you can press harder. So here, I'll show you an example. So here I'm going to press hard, and you see I get that big fat line. I can press lightly, and I get a thinner line. So you can do it that way. You can just kind of emphasize it more. Now you could really go crazy with this gravel in the foreground, and you could really try and indicate exactly where all the shadows lie and stuff like that. I'm not really going to do that. It's too boring, but you could. And now here's this tree, which I now realize I made in slightly the wrong place and slightly the wrong size. So,
I mean, the tree is smaller than Alice.
Yeah, it's not taller than Alice. It's wider, obviously. But maybe I want to make different kinds of lines here. So I'm going to make these sort of like Z squiggly lines.
Oh, MK, who's a rural urban sketcher, has an interesting tip for you.
Yeah.
To get a narrow line with a fountain pen, turn the nib upside down.
Yeah, you can. So I'm now doing that, and you can see I can get a slightly one. This is not an incredibly responsive nib, but it's pretty good.
Again, we're gonna get the hate mail from Lammy. I mean, we love Lammy.
They love us. I'm sure.
You're giving them a real hard time.
No, sometimes a non-responsive nib is not necessarily a bad thing, because you might want to have a nib that isn't responsive. You might want to have a nib that stays consistent when you push too hard on it. You know, that you don't have a lot of variety in your line. That's not a bad thing. You know, it's kind of you might have a pen that basically you want the lines to always be the same, and if you accidentally push too hard, you don't want that to screw it up. So if with fountain pens, you can have very soft kind of metal that is very springy and bouncy, and that gives you really flexible lines. But sometimes if you were writing, just taking notes or something like that, you wouldn't want a pen that's kind of going berserk and going from soft to hard all the time. You want consistency. If you were using a technical pen, technical pens are completely non-responsive, where they have the line stays exactly the same because it's like a little metal tube, and you don't want to have any change at all in what the lines that you're making. So I'm going to make Alice's. Just going to color in Alice a little bit, and I'm going to keep her darker than her horse to indicate that the horse is sort of light colored, but. Here's another thing also to look at is see how when I drew this tree, I drew these bushes, which are right behind the tree. I kind of drew them butting up against the tree. A smarter idea might have been to just leave a little area around it so that the tree stands out, if I really want to tell the story of the tree. In the case of Alice, I don't want to draw a lot of stuff around her because I want her to sort of stand out. So I'm going to keep her kind of in the clear. But I'm going to also put down a couple of little... And see, I can also draw these rocks a little bit bigger as they are in the foreground, so that you get that sense of this is closer to me. And whereas here you can barely see them. So think about those sorts of things. Let's go up here. We haven't done this part here. This is pretty dark because this picture was taken
after lunch.
I think it was actually taken at about 11 o'clock in the morning. So
before lunch.
Yeah.
High noon.
High noon, and yet the shadows are dark, but normally you would think at high noon you wouldn't have shadows, right? Would you? I don't know. You'd have shadows directly underneath the thing as opposed to it casting big shadows. So I'm now stepping back just to look at this thing for a minute, so to see generally, am I getting the overall sense of it? And I feel like this whole middle part isn't really telling much of a story at all. So I want to tell the story of this kind of biggish
volcanic
pile of rocks that are coming down to the foreground, and they're kind of carving out this kind of gully in the middle here. And so the sky, I think I'm going to leave white.
I feel like you've kind of lost Alice a little bit. Do you feel that way?
I do. I think I could add some more detail to her.
She just sort of looks like a clump of bush, just another...
Yeah, she doesn't really draw your eye in, it's true. could heighten her shadow a bit more. That might help. So she looks a bit bolder. I could make this her. Generally, the darkest thing on the page will often draw your eye. So I could just make her shadow on the left side of her a bit darker. And I just gave her horse a big fat leg unnecessarily.
Oops.
But now I can turn that into her front leg as well. So anyway. So now I'm going to look at it and just not think about the photo for a minute and just think what would make this into a better picture, better drawing, better composition. I think one would be to separate this hill a bit more. There's barely any detail here. So sitting back, looking at it, squinting at it a little bit will help you to see where it needs some balance. And you could also make some more. This is kind of random dots that I've made, random bits of gravel, but I could also use the gravel here to kind of indicate some shadows. You see how this part of the grass is also sort of casting a shadow, or at least it's darker there. So I could do that by using texture.
Well, I think there is, where Alice's horse is traveling is a little road, and I don't see that in your, I mean, maybe you're not
It's kind of a road that's going
intentionally, but you know, there's definitely a curved road.
Yeah, it's a road that's going back here. So here, just those few little lines kind of help that. A few little dots. And I could also help it by...
Well, I think the road kind of comes to the foreground, which is sort of missing here, right?
Foreground, yeah. So I could sharpen up this edge. That will give it a bit more of a sense that it's leading you in there. And that it's going to kind of go behind the tree. That she's going to travel back behind the tree. So, all right. So part of it is also thinking, like, what are you trying to say with your drawing? What are you trying to say about this landscape? You know, and I might want to be saying that it has lots of different, even though it's just a desert kind of landscape, which you would think would be fairly uninteresting, it actually has a lot of things going on, a lot of different kinds of foliage and rocks and stuff like that. So I'm trying to make it kind of colorful by having lots of different textures on it. That could be the story. The story could be, it's the story of Alice traveling through this landscape, which isn't kind of not what I'm trying to do. All right. So, yeah, I mean, Fran says, she says, I forget not to look at the photo, but I think it's important to say to yourself, why am I drawing this? And I'm not drawing it in order to have a drawing of this photo, because I have the photo, so what's the benefit? But it's really to say, this is my picture, and I can decide what I want it to say. And nobody's ever going to know that I took liberties. It has a life of its own, a purpose of its own, different from the photograph. So, and then there isn't a sun here, but I could put a sun over here. I'm just going to draw a circle. So there's just a little circle there.
That was sort of how the moon looked when it was coming up.
Yeah, it's true. We saw the moon. So yeah, so that composition, I think, is helped by having that circle there.
Do you feel like you really captured the fuzziness of these grasses, which to me are a huge protagonist of this drawing? And they're long grasses. It's kind of furry.
I think you're right, but I think I'm nervous about it because I don't want to put too many lines in here.
It feels like the kind of thing you might want to use like a thinner pen or a different pen.
I do have a slightly thinner pen.
It's just like such a different texture. And I feel like like even that little bit that you just did in the shadow,
See, now I'm using a Micron 005, which is an even narrower pen. So I can really do really thin lines if I want to. But I think part of what it is the reason this looks like soft grass is actually not the foreground, but it's the edge, it's the back. If you look at how that back, see how the tops of the grass, how you see how fine it is based on the negative space behind them. Like, what are you seeing through it? What are you seeing? Like, you're seeing through these bits of grass to the stuff behind it.
I just feel like the grasses are sort of long, and the lines you made in the middle of them are sort of like stubby little hyphens.
Right, but if you look at the whole overall shape of this grass, there's not a lot of differentiation inside.
But I think what you're doing here in the shadow, just making those wispy longer bits, is helping me so much.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. These were, I mean, they weren't as high as an elephant's eye, but they were, and they're a huge part of the landscape. When you think of southern Arizona at this time of year, those dry grasses.
I think it's also trying to make these thin lines into a shape by making a lot of them together. So it isn't just randomly scattering a bunch of lines, but it's saying like what, down here they're forming like a little triangle,
Yeah. No,
that was good.
That helped me a lot.
And then the tree is, see how the tree is kind of lost in the grass, so you can indicate that by just showing the tree through the grass in a way. So yeah, but I don't want to overdo it because then it'll seem like a big mass.
Yeah, I think it's kind of looking just about right to me, which is good since
you were there.
Well, also you only have 5 minutes left.
Oh, good. All right, I'm going to stop. I mean, as I said, we could keep going, making little marks like this forever. All right, good. I'm going to have a cup of coffee.
We don't have any giveaways today, but we are going to be sending everyone on our mailing list an announcement about our new course. Do you want to tell them about it?
When are we sending that out?
Today, later.
Oh, no. Yeah, so last year, was it last year?
June of 2021.
Wow, okay. So 18 months ago, I did a course.
A workshop.
A workshop, actually, called Dip into Dip Pens. So what that was is taking a dip pen, which is,
probably your favoriteest thing to use.
It's like a pen that looks like this that has a metal nib on the end. And you use India ink. And it's can be an intimidating thing for people. And so I did a workshop where I explained how I use it, and how I use it in drawing and how I use it in writing, because you may have seen me do sort of calligraphy with that tool. And some people took the workshop. A lot of people actually took the workshop, but it was a one-time thing. And so what I decided I want to do is I want to take all that material from how to use a dip pen and turn it into a course. So I've basically taken that content. So if you've taken this workshop, you don't need this course. You've got the workshop. But if you haven't and you want to work at your own pace, this course will teach you how to use the dip pen, how to dip it properly, how to clean it, how to make different kinds of marks with it, how to do a simple drawing with it, how to do a much more complex drawing with it, and then ultimately how to do lettering and to do your own stuff. So I think that you will find, Monica took it and she said that it changed her art completely, and she's so happy. So there you go. Change and happiness, which are often correlated. So yeah, that is something that's going to come up, and I'll tell you more about it once it's out there, but if you're interested in that, you will see it. So we'll be announcing that soon.
So we're selling it because we never previously sold the recordings of our workshops. People asked us again and again. I missed it. I don't know how they miss it because we emailed like over and over for a month. But inevitably, people would say, how can I get it? And this is probably our most popular workshop, and now you can. Well, later today, after later today.
So if you've taken this workshop, forget about this course. If you haven't taken the workshop, it is now available as a course which you can work at your own speed, and we will be announcing that soon. And there'll be lots of things you can do with it.
Yeah.
Okay, so for those of you who want to share what you did today, your landscape, I would love to see it. So let's go here where you can share it. Hashtag SBS Draw With Me. That's the tag that you put on your drawing when you post it on Instagram or on Facebook, or if you've taken a class with us, you're a member of the schoolyard, and you can share it there. And then what happens is probably Tuesday, we'll gather up all the drawings that have been posted, and we will start to edit them together so they will be the beginning of next week's Draw With Me. And we'll be able to see them. So please consider sharing them. I'd love to see them, and I'm sure everybody else would too.
Worst case, you don't do social media, you can email it to info@sketchbookschool.com.
See there at the top, info@sketchbookschool.com. Yeah. Forget the mailing address. I have to change that.
Yeah, we have no giveaway this week. Yes. Sorry. You know, we weren't meant to be broadcasting this week, so the fact that we're here at all is the prize. That's the
bonus. It's true.
It's a prize.
So Art for All, the podcast, we've now just concluded the season. We're getting ready for the next season. At some point, we will come back to you and announce that, but there are 75 episodes that you can access however you'd like. Danny'sEssays.com. I write an essay every Friday. I'm going to be writing my essay today. I've got to get to that. And that will be out. If you'd like to sign up for it, it's free, and I'll send it to you. And it's kind of just in sort of some kind of inspiration or just talking about the creative process or a motivational thing. And you can get that at Danny'sEssays.com. So there we have it.
Hey, do you want to talk about our subscription goal that we made and achieved?
Yes, our goal was to get 175,000 subscribers to this channel. We
eked it out. It was like
yesterday.
Yeah, the PBS. Well, we were hoping to have it on December 31st, but people are sluggish this time of year. They're all full of Christmas puddings and whatnot.
It's meaningless anyway. But anyway, So look, it's time to go. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us today. I look forward to seeing your landscapes, and keep making art. See you then. Bye-bye.